Greetings. Yo, the Black Light giving it to you raw. Check this out.
Ever told. This story that I am about to manifest to you is the history of the God tribe of Shabazz, who are, as we know today, the so-called Negroes of America, and the Holy Bible refers to them as the children of Israel. Keep in mind, the words Israel, Hebrew, and Shabazz are all the same. The only difference is that they belong to a different language. And, in order for King James to conceal the truth or true identity of the most talked about people of his book, he wisely used the terms Israel and Hebrew. In the Jewish language, Israel means chosen tribe. In the Hebrew language, it means gifted tribe or God's elect. In the book of Genesis 13:13-15, it is explained to Abraham, what will happen to his seed, tribe. Also, in the book of Malachi 3:8-9, God asked a very important question. So, by reading the Bible very carefully, you will notice that it speaks of one particular people from the beginning to the end. And now, the story. For 20 years, John Harding Hawkins, an Englishman and a trader by occupation, came among the black man to trade. In time, he learned the black man's language and his culture. In fact, I should say his way of life. As he learned more about him, he noticed that some of the blacks were satisfied and others were not. As he came to know the dissatisfied, he learned that they were dissatisfied with the administration which they were under, such as the state of affairs, employment, business, foreign relations, economics, internal and external, and most of all, the religion, Islam. These people were Muslims. John Hawkins saw that about 70% were satisfied and 30% were dissatisfied. The region where the people were living at this time was the eastern end of the Mediterranean Sea, the country we know today as Syria. So, John Hawkins told those who were dissatisfied that he could take them to a new world where they could start life anew, where they could make more gold for their labor than they were making in their own land. He also told them they could get better positions in the government and choice land for their choosing. In other words, they were going to live like kings and queens in this new world. As they thought of this paradise, they never realized that they were now living in paradise at that moment. For that is the choicest land on the planet Earth today. These are the holy lands, as the Bible points out to us: Egypt, Jordan, Syria, and Persia, Iraq. In the year of 1555, John H. Hawkins and a handful of black men, women, and children set sail for the New World. The black people did not know that they were about to be enslaved. As the good ship Jesus set sail, the crew of the ship appeared with rifles and guns along with leg irons and chains. When it dawned on these blacks what was about to happen, the whole ship was in an uproar, and in the confusion, some jumped overboard rather than go into slavery. Others were subdued and put into chains, after which they were put into the hold of the ship, because these trips took about 3 to 5 months to complete, and provisions were not plentiful. When they landed some months later in Jamestown, Virginia, the ones who were in charge had already built a large camp for the slaves to live in because this was a very carefully planned project, planned to the last detail. The white man's intention was to dispossess the black man of his whole way of life, and in turn, make a new black man which would serve him faithfully for all of his days. John H. Hawkins was so successful on his first trip of kidnapping these black people from the east and selling them into slavery in the west that he went back to England and bought 2 more ships because the black men brought so good a price on the slave block that he knew if he could be successful on a few more trips to the New World with the black slaves, he could retire and live a comfortable life in his mother country, England. John H. Hawkins came back to the east and told them, "Your brothers and sisters are asking for you to come to the New World and join them because they are living a better life." So, the black men of the East, being 9,000 miles from their black brothers in the New World and not knowing they are kidnapped and forced into slavery against their will, took John Hawkins as a friend and not as a deceiver. In no time, he had enough to fill his 2 ships and they sailed for the New World. When John H. Hawkins and his 2 ships landed in Jamestown, Virginia from the east, these blacks were also put into the same camp. He noticed the work had already begun on the first blacks. Their studies had shown many valuable points about the black people, such as how they prayed, their actions, and many other things. Keep in mind that the black man knew his name, country, flag, language, religion, and most of all, his God, who was Allah. The white men realized that they must take this, the black man's heritage, from them in order to have a lifelong slave. Stage 1, robbery of the black man's self. As we know, the white man's history teaches that the first slaves were brought to this country, America, the New World, in 1619 and 1621. As stated in the beginning, the black man was taken into captivity in 1555. He was put into camps that were like small cities. These cities had stores for all supplies. The ones in charge had instructions to watch the black people day and night and write everything down on paper that he did, nothing else, just watch him. This was the first stage set up to rob the black man of his identity, of who he was. This camp was the receiving point. This is where they would condition the black man, and this is the period missing out of his history, 1555 to 1620. This is about 65 years. Stage 2, the great separation of the firstborn. Here, every time the black women would have a child, they would take the child to a different part of the camp. This child would grow up under a white woman. After the child reached the age of 6 or 7, he or she would be shipped to a plantation a little to the west in the deeper south. Sometimes, the states of North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, to name a few. The blacks he had now were all of a different tribe, nature, and whenever you saw them you would know, because they looked like brothers and sisters. Their shades were alike, their height was alike as well as their characteristics. This must be concealed from them, said the white man. Stage 3 is the injection of fear. As a result, many blacks from Africa were brought here during the 1600s in order to mix with the God tribe. They, being mixed now with the new arrival of Africans who spoke a different dialect, made it impossible to understand one another when they came in contact. What the white men had learned from the first experiment in the camps was now introduced to every plantation for a guide to follow. Some plantations could hold up to 5,000 slaves. The main objective on all plantations was to take the baby from its mother and in turn let a white woman raise it for a very trusted black mammy. By the 1700s, the white man had produced a new race of people who did not know their names, who did not know their language, who did not know his history, who did not know his culture, who did not know his religion, Islam, or God, Allah. The third stage was to inject fear into the blacks. One, which was brought about, was by taking a black woman who was pregnant with a child and tie her hands and feet to a stake. The plantation owner would notify all plantation owners in a radius of 100 miles to bring their slaves to his plantation. He would then take a knife and cut the child from the black woman's womb, while the others looked on in terror at what the white man had done. If any black man came to her aid, the other whites who were watching would shoot him down like a dog. After getting her baby, the white man would take it and drop it to the ground and squash the baby's head flat. And to this very day, the so-called Negroes fear the white man and do not know the true reason why. Many other acts were committed against the so-called Negroes, such as lynchings, raping, and burning them at the stake, to name a few. Stage 4 birth of the USA and its wealth, how?
1555, numerology speaking, that adds up to 7. This is to be continued. Assalamu alaikum.